Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into, well, a mountain of material, really, about one of the wildest financial rides in recent memory. We're talking about the crypto billionaires, their incredible rise, and often their spectacular collapse.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. We're looking at this new breed almost of digital native billionaires, people who built these massive fortunes in, this decentralized, often unregulated space.
Right.
But what's striking is how often the endings look familiar, like really classic stories of fraud, greed, the kind of stuff you see throughout financial history. It seems like the tech might be new, but maybe human nature isn't.
Absolutely. And our sources really zoom in on probably the defining story here. Sam Bankman-Fried, SPF, and his exchange, FTX. It's incredible ascent and then just catastrophic crash.
Right. And we have to connect that to the bigger picture, people like his main rival, Changpeng Zhao or CZ from Binance. Because in this world, it often felt like, well, one person's downfall was directly somebody else's gain. It was very zero-sum.
Yeah, a real Game of Thrones vibe sometimes.
Kind of, yeah. So our goal here is to really unpack it all. The mechanics behind the money, the strange philosophies driving some of these people, especially effective altruism. We definitely need to talk about that.
Oh, absolutely.
And just the sheer audacity, the personalities involved, and maybe the shaky financial ethics that kind of underpin the whole thing. We want to go beyond the headlines, look at how places like FTX and Alameda Research, SBF trading firm, how they were maybe fundamentally flawed from the get-go.
Try and find that common thread, right?
Huh?
Between these like modern tech guys and the empire builders of the past, or even, the architects of other big frauds.
Exactly, because the patterns are often there if you look closely.
And you mentioned effective altruism. That's where it gets really interesting right away, isn't it? The sources point to this massive contradiction, this whole movement supposedly about doing good. But internally, the people involved were described as, and this is a direct quote, more ruthless than Russian oligarchs with each other, financially speaking. That contrast is just stark.
It really is, and that's probably the best place to start.
Okay, so let's dive into that world. Alameda Research and FTX. The culture there was apparently steeped in this idea of effective altruism, or EA.
Right, and EA, for anyone not familiar, it's this philosophy that basically says doing good should be, well, quantitative. You should calculate how to use your resources, time, money, to have the biggest positive impact.
Exactly. It's very analytical, almost mathematical.
Yeah.
And the sources point out this attracted a certain type of person, people who were already really, really good at calculating odds, the expected value of these incredibly complex financial bets.
Like high-frequency traders?
Precisely. And EA encouraged them to apply that same cold calculation to their lives, asking things like, okay, how can I make the absolute most money, even if it's risky or, maybe morally gray, so that later I can give it all away and have the maximum impact. That was the core idea.
Earning to give. That was the phrase, wasn't it? That's the one. And this is where it gets, well, a little unsettling, like you said. It wasn't just about charity. It was about choosing a career, maybe high-risk trading, specifically because it generated the most cash to donate later.
They were calculating the expected moral value of their lives, almost, using metrics like QALYs, quality-adjusted life years saved.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very detached way to think about impact. And it gave them this powerful justification for taking massive financial risks. If the potential payoff for charity was big enough, the risk seemed worth it, morally speaking.
And the established finance world definitely noticed these bright minds leaving. Jane Street, right, a big HFT firm, they're paying first-year traders, what, $200,000?
Yeah, good money.
And yet some of their top quantitative people are walking away to join this thing called Alameda Research, which at the time sounded like a total fly-by-night crypto startup.
And Jane Street saw that as a huge red flag, not just losing talent, but recognizing why they were leaving. These quants were moving into crypto, this unregulated space, where they could use their skills to exploit inefficiencies and volatility in ways Jane Street, being regulated, just couldn't. It was regulatory arbitrage, basically, using HFT skills to play in the gaps of global rules.
So Jane Street saw them as this potential destabilizing force, playing by different rules, or maybe no rules at all.
Pretty much. They knew if these guys succeeded, they could seriously disrupt or even outcompete the established players simply because they weren't bound by the same constraints.
Which leads back to the internal culture at Alameda. You got all these people, investors too, publicly saying they're going to give away all their money eventually. This kind of extreme financial selflessness.
Right. You'd think that would create a really collaborative, generous environment inside the firm, wouldn't you?
You would. But the sources paint a completely different picture.
Utterly different. That phrase, more ruthless than Russian oligarchs. That was about how they treated each other financially. It's like the noble mission gave them a free pass, a moral license maybe, to be absolutely cutthroat in the pursuit of actually getting that capital.
And it wasn't just like tough negotiation. You mentioned specific examples. That loan Alameda took from its own investors at 50% interest.
Yeah, 50%.
Yeah.
An employee called it a shark loan. I mean, assuming that's annualized, which is standard. That's predatory. It screams desperation on Alameda's part or extreme risk.
And the lenders were their own supposedly ideologically aligned backers.
Exactly. People who supposedly believed in the same save the world mission. And then you have SBF himself, the leader of this supposedly collaborative project. The sources say he absolutely refused to share any equity with anyone, kept it all for himself, complete control.
Okay, wait. How does that square with effective altruism? If the goal is maximizing good, wouldn't collaboration and shared ownership, increase the chances or the scale, or is it just about him having total control over the money?
I think that's the crucial insight, right? For SBF, the calculation probably went something like, I am the most rational actor here. I am the best person to decide how this capital is deployed for maximum good. Sharing equity means sharing control, means slowing things down, means potentially suboptimal decisions.
So his own perceived superiority justified, well, hoarding power, and maybe even exploiting his own team financially.
It looks that way. The belief that he was the key variable in the expected value equation could provide this really dangerous moral justification for extreme control. The ideology of giving it all away somehow fostered this internal environment where trust seemed completely absent. It's a paradox.
Moving to SBF, the person, his whole image was so deliberately constructed, wasn't it? The sources describe him, 26 years old, white guy, the hairdo of a lunatic, baggy shorts, wrinkled T-shirt.
Yeah, the whole anti-establishment tech bro look. Projecting this idea that he was just about the code, the ideas, not appearances. The hot relic fancier, right?
Right. But apparently at first people didn't buy it. Like they wouldn't believe he's this rich crypto guy until he literally showed them his account balance on his phone.
Yeah, the money had to do the talking because the image wasn't, conventionally powerful.
But then there's that weird anecdote about the power of meeting him in person. He flies to Asia, meets these bosses from a Chinese crypto exchange.
Who had frozen millions of Alameda's money for seemingly no reason.
Yeah. And after meeting SBF, this weird, messy-haired kid, they just give the money back.
It's a wild story, but it tells you a lot about that early crypto space. There were no real rules, no reliable courts, no clear regulators, so what mattered? Sheer wealth, apparently, and maybe this kind of weird personal conviction or charisma.
He found himself in these rooms with, an important person from every single crypto company.
And realized, as he put it, there was no one like us out there. He saw a power vacuum. Authority wasn't based on institutions. It was based on personality and visible, almost outrageous success.
And that success inevitably brought him into conflict with others trying to build empires, especially CZ at Binance.
Right. CZ ran the bigger exchange. And after FTX went down, the sources are pretty clear. The list of people who actually came out better off was very short. And CZ was at the top of that list.
He basically vacuumed up the market share FTX left behind.
Yeah, the collapse of his rival was a massive strategic win for Binance. It really highlights that zero-sum dynamic we talked about.
And this whole idea of the young genius destined for greatness, maybe a bit ruthless.
Yeah.
It has echoes, doesn't it? Historical parallels.
Oh, absolutely. You look at someone like Bill Gates in his early days. The sources mention him at Lakeside School, just matter-of-factly saying, I'm going to make my first $1 million by the time I'm 25.
Like it was already decided.
Yeah, this sense of predestiny. And his approach to business was famously competitive, like total war. He wasn't just ambitious, he was apparently ruthless in wanting to dominate every market segment, even if it meant undercutting competitors or former friends. It was systematic.
And then there's the ego aspect, the belief that business success translates into, global savior status. Adam Neumann from WeWork comes to mind.
Oh, definitely. Neumann didn't just want a big valuation for WeWork. He wanted the biggest. Why? Because he apparently believed that when world crises hit, wars started, he would be the one world leaders would have to call to fix things.
Wow.
That leap from huge valuation to I'm essential for global stability, that's the kind of trajectory SBF seemed to be on, especially with all his political lobbying and donations. It's this belief that massive wealth gives you not just influence, but a kind of ultimate authority.
It really seems like they see themselves not just as CEOs, but as Architects of reality, almost.
Yeah.
Benevolent dictators in their own minds who need unchecked power to achieve their grand visions.
And that need for unchecked power, that belief in their own exceptionalism, well, that often leads directly to cutting corners, ignoring rules, and eventually disaster.
Yeah, that need for absolute control, which SBF showed by, keeping all the equity, it naturally extended to controlling the money itself. And when you strip away all the crypto jargon, the blockchain complexity, the actual fraud at FTX was, well, almost disappointingly simple.
Right. The sources really hammer this point home. There was one single devastating secret that almost nobody outside seemed to grasp, even the people who were suspicious of FTX. What was it?
Stated plainly, it was this. The customers' deposits that are supposed to be inside FTX are actually inside Alameda Research. We'll stop.
So not some complex vulnerability in the Bitcoin code or anything like that.
Nope, not a tech failure. It was old-school misuse of customer funds. Embezzlement, basically, just wearing crypto clothes. FTX customer money was being funneled over to SBF's private hedge fund, Alameda, to cover its risky bets.
How did they actually do that? Was it like a hidden feature in the exchange's software or just bad accounting? The sources suggest it was more fundamental than just bad accounting. It seems there was a lack of real separation between the exchange, FTX, and the trading firm, Alameda. And critically, SBF apparently had access to some kind of backdoor mechanism.
A backdoor.
Yeah, something in the system that let Alameda withdraw funds from FTX customer accounts without setting off the usual alarms or margin calls that would apply to other users. Essentially, FTX customer deposits became Alameda's private, no-questions-asked credit line.
And the justification in SBF's mind was probably,
Likely something along the lines of, Alameda needs liquidity for these potentially hugely profitable trades. The customer money is just sitting there safely in FTX. I am smart enough to manage this risk. I'll make a huge profit, put the money back, and no one will ever know. The classic gambler's fallacy combined with that EA-fueled belief in his own superior judgment.
what blows my mind is how they kept this hidden. Crypto is full of skeptics, right? Hedge funds looking for any weakness to short these companies. How did they miss this?
It's pretty remarkable. It speaks to how opaque the whole operation was. I think the sheer complexity of crypto, plus SBF's relentless PR campaign, his political connections, his image as the responsible face of the industry, it all acted as this incredible smokescreen.
So people were looking for, complex algorithmic failures or market manipulation secrets.
Exactly. They were looking for a crypto problem, a tech problem. They weren't looking for the oldest trick in the book, the guy running the casino dipping into the till. The audacity of it, combined with the perception of FTX as this separate, legitimate exchange, just masked the simple human-level fraud.
And when that truth finally spilled out, the impact of the people closest to SBF, the ones who really believed in him and the mission, it was brutal.
Absolutely devastating. The sources are clear. Employees who'd poured their faith and often their life savings into FTX stock or FTT tokens, they lost everything overnight. People lost homes, marriages fell apart, friendships ended. The human cost was immense, and it fell hardest on those who had been most loyal.
Then came the legal fallout for the inner circle. The dominoes fell pretty fast, didn't they?
They did. Caroline Ellison, who was CEO of Alameda and also SBF's sometime girlfriend, she was the first to plead guilty and cooperate. Then Gary Wang, the co-founder and CTO, and Nishad Singh, the director of engineering. They followed soon after.
It really underscores the betrayal, doesn't it? SBF caused immense suffering to the very people who'd bought into his vision most deeply.
Completely. That self-proclaimed mission of doing good didn't protect anyone, least of all his own team, from the consequences of basic financial crime. And like we said, the winners were few, mostly CZ, consolidating market power, and the insiders who cut deals quickly.
This whole idea of maintaining a facade of legitimacy while something is fundamentally broken underneath, it reminds you of other major corporate scandals.
Oh, absolutely. Look at Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes. The core technology, the Edison blood testing machines, they just didn't work reliably. Failed quality control, constantly.
So how did they keep billions flowing in for years?
Image and influence. They built this incredibly high-powered board of directors. We're talking Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, William Perry, huge names. Sterling, larger-than-life reputations, as one source put it.
That board gave them this massive stamp of legitimacy, right? People thought, well, if these guys are involved, it must be real.
Exactly. It deflected scrutiny from the actual science. Meanwhile, inside the company, they were faking it, running most tests on regular, commercially available lab machines, not the Edison. and crucially, using tiny finger prick blood samples.
Which weren't suitable for the standard machines.
Right, so they had to dilute the samples massively to get enough volume. But diluting them that much meant the concentration of what they were trying to measure, cholesterol, whatever, dropped so low that the results were often wildly inaccurate. It was a complex illusion built on reputation and secrecy, hiding a fundamental failure.
And you see that blend of perceived success and hidden rot in earlier financial scandals, too, like with Ivan Buiesky and Michael Milken in the 80s, kind of the dawn of modern insider trading awareness.
Yeah, Buiesky had this incredible run, seeming consistently prescient in his takeover bets. Naturally, rumors started flying that he had to have inside information.
But Milken, whose firm Drexel backed Buiesky, publicly dismissed it, right? Saying something like, Drexel backs winners and Buiesky's a winner.
Right, pure confidence game. But behind the scenes, the sources reveal Milken actually took a personal equity stake in Buiesky's operation. Why? To tie Buiesky even closer, likely ensuring continued access to whatever information or market feel Buiesky possessed. It shows how, on these new financial frontiers, success and potential criminality get tangled up very quickly. The public sees a genius, the insiders might see a rigged system.
It's not just about cheating individuals either, but abusing the system itself. The LIBOR scandal's a prime example.
Oh, definitely. LIBOR, the London Interbank Offered Rate, was this fundamental benchmark for interest rates globally. It affected trillions in loans, mortgages, everything.
And traders figured out how to manipulate it.
Yeah, often by tiny amounts, just a few basis points. But because the rate underpins so much financial plumbing, even small tweaks could generate huge profits for their trading books. There's this quote from Tom Hayes, one of the traders involved, casually mentioning how a contact at RBS would just nudge the rate for him. Set it down at 0.64 for me.
Just like ordering coffee.
Pretty much. He apparently worried about the whole thing losing credibility, but the pressure to make money was immense. And the potential penalties were huge. He faced a possible 12-year sentence. It shows how tampering with the core infrastructure of finance, even slightly, is seen as incredibly serious.
So, whether it's crypto, blood tests, or global interest rates, the common denominator seems to be exploiting trust in a system that's too opaque, too centralized, or just lacking decent oversight.
Precisely. The failure mode is almost always governance and honesty, not the underlying tech itself. And that lack of oversight, that opacity, it often stems directly from the founder's personality. This intense, almost primal need for absolute control over their creation seems to link all these figures across different eras.
It's the driving force behind resisting regulation, isn't it?
Yeah.
They don't want anyone looking over their shoulder.
Exactly. It's that creator mentality. You see it with Andrew Carnegie advising his partner Frick not to merge his company into Carnegie Steel. Why? Carnegie apparently said Frick could not be proud of it because it wouldn't be solely your work. The ultimate value wasn't just money, it was authorship, total control.
That resonates. And then you have someone like Cornelius Vanderbilt, the Commodore. The sources say he had little regard for legal formalities or public office.
Yeah, he literally resented any hint of condescension. Total self-belief. There's that story where a customs collector tried to enforce some rule on him, and Vanderbilt basically said he'd just ignore the guy, declared, "I think it more than he dares to do."
Just pure defiance based on his own power.
Right. That level of confidence, that willingness to operate outside or even against the established rules, seems almost necessary to build these kinds of empires in new, poorly defined territories, whether it's railroads or crypto.
And SBF mirrored this desire for control, not just with equity, but operationally, right? Extreme secrecy like Howard Hughes.
Oh, the Hughes parallels are strong. Hughes was famous for delaying decisions until they became irrelevant, using chaos almost as a management tool.
And conducting secret negotiations, telling his team not to even tell his own lawyers.
Yes, because the lawyers were still trying to discourage me. That's exactly the kind of dynamic sources suggest existed around SBF, using things like auto-deleting messages on Signal and Slack, avoiding formal records. It's not just paranoia, it's a strategy.
It keeps the founder's impulsive decisions as the only real law within the company. It cuts out dissenting voices, caution, governance.
Precisely. It ensures total control, which, as we've seen, can be incredibly dangerous when combined with massive risk-taking.
And when individuals accumulate that much wealth and operate with that kind of autonomy, their influence inevitably spills over into politics, doesn't it? They start trying to shape the rules of the game itself.
Absolutely. It's a global pattern. You see it with figures like the Koch brothers, using their truly unfathomably large fortunes, as the sources put it, to build this huge network. think tanks, lobbying groups, academic funding.
Right, pushing conservative libertarian ideas that were once considered pretty fringe into the mainstream.
Exactly. They didn't just support candidates, they built an entire ideological infrastructure. It fundamentally changed the political landscape by professionalizing and amplifying those specific viewpoints.
And it happens across the political spectrum. George Soros, for example. Huge amounts of money flowing through his Open Society foundations, maybe $100 million a year just in the U.S., plus massive private donations to Democratic groups.
Yeah, backing causes like civil liberties, drug decriminalization, promoting what he defines as open society and democracy. Both Koch and Soros show how immense private wealth gets translated directly into attempts to reshape society according to a specific vision. The scale is just enormous.
And historically, this has happened before. The sources mentioned the Texas oilmen decades ago, pouring millions into conservative causes.
Right, funding everything from mainstream think tanks to more extreme groups. The sources argue this kickstarted what they call the Texanization of right-wing politics. It shows how private money doesn't just influence elections. It can fundamentally redirect the priorities and tone of entire political movements over time.
So SBF's huge political donations and lobbying efforts fit right into this historical pattern of new money trying to buy influence and favorable regulation.
Perfectly. It's part of the empire-building playbook.
Now, what happens when things inevitably go wrong? When the scandal breaks or the regulators finally close in, the focus shifts, right? They're managing the fallout, controlling the narrative.
Yeah, the cycle of scrutiny and recovery kicks in. It becomes about image management, projecting competence and control, even when things are falling apart.
Like Steve Cohen at SAC Capital, facing all those insider trading accusations. The sources say his team decided cooperating with the SEC was the smarter option. Why?
Not necessarily because he had nothing to hide, but to create the appearance that he had nothing to hide. It was a strategic move to reassure nervous investors amidst a storm of bad press. Perception became key. Appearing transparent was more valuable than fighting every charge.
And Robert Maxwell, the British media mogul, after that damaging public inquiry into his business practices, he became obsessed with credibility.
Desperately. He staked his reputation on his company's profitability, trying to project this image of unstoppable commercial success as proof of his, moral and business integrity.
Used charm when he could, but couldn't handle criticism.
Apparently not. He just dismissed critics as ignorant about business. It's that same pattern. When the substance is challenged, double down on the performance, on the projection of invincible success and authority.
So even in the face of potential ruin or legal action, the instinct is often to manage the story, protect the image of the infallible founder.
It seems to be. They're selling the narrative of their own genius right up until the very end, sometimes even after. Hashtag check outro. So looking back at this deep dive, it really feels like there's this underlying truth, doesn't it? Doesn't matter if the asset is oil or steel or software code or these weird decentralized tokens. The stories of building these massive fortunes, they share so much DNA.
Yeah, you always see that initial need to break the rules or at least bend them.
Yeah.
Intense, almost brutal competition, and always operating right up against, or sometimes way over, ethical and legal lines.
Right. And here's the kicker. The collapse, when it comes, it's almost never because the underlying technology failed. The blockchain didn't break, the code didn't spontaneously combust. It's usually much simpler.
That's a failure of governance.
Governance, accountability, or just basic honesty. Old-fashioned human failings dressed up in new technological clothes.
And the biggest irony we kept coming back to, FTX and Alameda were born out of this supposedly high-minded quantitative moral philosophy, effective altruism, calculating how to do the most good. And yet, it devolved almost instantly into this internal environment of, financial savagery and ended in one of the most straightforward types of fraud imaginable, stealing customer money.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About the potentially corrupting influence of getting rich too fast with too few rules, especially when it attracts people who already believe they're smarter than everyone else and may be exempt from ordinary constraints.
Yeah. It's also interesting, like you touched on, how different paths lead to similar outcomes. You contrasted China's internet model, very operationally heavy, lots of people involved in delivery payments.
Right, massive logistical operations.
Versus Silicon Valley or the crypto world's approach, more focused on software, algorithms, leverage, decentralization, maybe fewer people, but more abstract power.
Exactly. Wildly different ways of building an empire. One relies on armies of people, the other on lines of code.
But the human element, The drive for absolute control, the temptation of greed, the spectacular flameouts, that seems depressingly consistent across the board. Geography, time, business model doesn't seem to matter much for that part.
It really doesn't. Which brings us to the final thought for you, the listener.
Okay, we've seen fortunes appear and disappear in weeks with FTX. If we agree that knowledge is most valuable when you can actually use it, what does this all mean practically?
Maybe the question becomes, what's our collective responsibility here? Do we need to think harder about regulating not just the type of asset, but the speed and the opacity with which wealth can be generated and concentrated, especially when it's tied to new, poorly understood technologies?
Because the alternative seems to be just waiting for the next inevitable implosion driven by simple, age-old human failings over and over again.
Exactly. Something to think about.